All right, we are recording this. It'll be made public. Is everybody okay with that? Either hand, yellow, thumbs up, whatever it is you want to do. All right. All right. I'm gonna look and see if I can
Yes.
find this other thing. Here we go. Here's something. There she is. He is.
Hey guys, sorry about that. I had to quickly get dressed and jump in my car. I'm here. Thank you. Thank you for waiting.
Can you see us?
No, I can't see you. I have my little, car screen on, but I can't see you.
Are you going to go to where you can see? Are you going to do this where you can see us? I have a reason I'm asking that.
No.
You're not? Okay. Well, then I'm going to go ahead. And since we're recording, you're okay with us recording this, right? And it's going to be public.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
Absolutely.
I want y'all to know, if you didn't know it, it has been snowing here in Texas. Did y'all know that? So I got out my hat. And I've gotten to wear it I got to wear it yesterday. It was really cool. And one of the things that's relevant, y'all know where this came from? This hat? No kidding. From Soviet Moscow.
Oh, see, yeah.
Yeah, there's history behind this hat. When in 1980, I don't know, about 86 or 87, I got asked to come to Moscow and speak to the all-union Center for Behavioral Research in Moscow because of the APG process. And it was in December. It was snowing sideways, honestly. It was a wild deal. And the reason why we were there is under the Soviet Union, and this is real common, talking about getting grants. Everybody gets a grant. That's a real big deal. You want to get a grant, and then they research stuff, and then they produce it, but then it doesn't go anywhere because there's no sales or anything like that go on except whatever gets put into the system. That's how it was. And so there was this thing. Have y'all ever heard of biofeedback? Anybody heard of biofeedback?
Yeah.
You need to look it up. And there's another thing called cerebral electrostimulation, and it's not shock treatment. It's a thing where it's a really low voltage thing that they do, and parts of the brain will cause the person to settle down, but not with chemicals. So it has a tendency not to cause the same kind of issues with the neurotransmitter system that it does. Anyway, in Russia, they had developed the CES, and they were really big into biofeedback in the early days. The residential programs that the APGs had and have always, whenever they've had them, have used biofeedback, and especially with the adolescents. The adolescents is super helpful with biofeedback and CES. Well, although the Russians had developed it, they weren't using it. They found out that we were using it everywhere, so they had us come over and talk to their scientists about how it gets used and everything, and start putting it into their programs there. It's a little piece of history of APGs that y'all might need to know and might want to know about. It goes way, way, way back. And that's not, that's 1986, something like that, 86 or 87. That's where I got the hat. Thank goodness, because it was so cold here. Man, that was awesome. All right. I am sorry. It looks like that. It looks like everybody's here who's going to be here for right now. I know that there was somebody else trying to get on, but they can't apparently get on. Anyhow, today we wanted to talk about sober living, and Mike you want to go over a little bit about what it is you're working on with this first, kind of set the stage?
Sure, happy to. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
So, great. All right, great. So yeah, we have been blessed with the University of Texas to get a very large grant from the block grants that the states were given to address the opioid epidemic. For those of you in Texas, those translate to TTOR dollars. And we've been given a block grant of that to open level 2 and level 3 recovery residences across the state of Texas for folks on MAT. So we're partnering with Recovery People, which is a organization here in Texas that does a variety of things, but one of the things they do is they operate an organization called Texas Recovery Oriented Housing Network, which is an association of Texas-based recovery residences, and it's affiliated through NAR, the National Association of Recovery Residences. So we're really excited. We're going to open 13 homes across the state, 4 in Houston, 4 in Austin, 2 in El Paso, 2 in San Angelo, and all should be opening up in March and April. We're going to be doing evaluation work, so we're going to be looking at changes in recovery maintenance, recovery capital, employment, quality of life, kind of your typical measures, as well as looking at group dynamics and how group dynamics and the culture of the home affect outcomes. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing. I'll stop there with that intro. Pass it back to John.
Okay. The interesting thing about this is, for example, yesterday the 3 of us were in a meeting, Robin and me and Mike, about how to make this all work. How many of you, Tim, I know you have a sober living center, so you're kind of coming from the other direction. You've got the sober living center and you want to learn more about, the alternative peer group, some of the things we've learned over the years and how to get them all flushed together and everything. Yesterday in the conversation, we were talking about, here's what's going on. Robin is moving. She has a house out in a suburb of Houston, and she is going, instead of us selling our house, we're talking about turning into sober living. And the conversation centered around how would it get used in connection with Lifeway's adult APG, and who owns it, who makes the decisions, how do the things work between the two, what are the benefits, what are the risks, all of those kinds of things. And there's a lot to it. I got to tell you that having sober living is a great help. It is a great help for adolescents and young adults. I always tell people this. I got it. And this is a really weird thing, but in all of the years that I've been working, adult males, it's not true for females, but it's close to almost the same numbers for females. Adult males who were trying to get sober and living at their parents' house. You all know how many I've seen make it doing that? 1. I can only name 1. I'm sure there were some others, but I actually can only name 1. Living at living with their parents, an adult male, and only a few more than that in females. The family issues get so plugged into the disease. I believe this is what it's all about. And I think it's harder on males because I think males carry some sort of, I'm supposed to be living on my own thing or something. I don't have it all boiled down. I'm just telling you the phenomena. It needs to be researched fully. So every time I have somebody come in, it's always a question, into the adult program, it's always a question of where they're going to live. And it's never answered easily. And if I send them to a sober living that doesn't understand alternative peer group programs, they'll many times get funneled into another path of recovery It's not as long-lived, doesn't have the case management, you know what I mean? And actually boils down to another program hopping situation, which is bad for the client. Program hopping is not good for clients. You break continuity of care and everything else. So figuring out how and what to do with sober living is a really, really good idea. So that's why I thought we would talk about this some today. Tim, you want to throw in something here? Because I know you're pretty well versed in all of this. Any comments or anything?
Visit my facilities. I have one and been doing this for about 3 years. 60% success rate. I've had people that stay here transition for just over a year, and our program is based on the continuity of the transitions, what they look like. A lot of the things with the information you shared, we track here, we do here. I have interns. It's all the best that I could come up with. I am a recovery coach, among other things, but that's not my profession. You all are professionals. I have been sober myself, or in recovery, for 41 years, and retired, got sober at a young age, had a good, healthy career, corporate career. Myself was able to enjoy that. I retired and started giving back about 15 years ago. And this is where I ended up. And this is the most important thing I think that I've done in my entire career and life.
What did you do before?
You probably know my work. If you've ever been into a Kroger signature store,
Yeah.
I designed that,
Ah,
and the marketing program behind that for the Kroger, with the Kroger company, with their training and assistance.
is part of the
Well-
retirement unending groceries forever and ever?
No,
They missed the
no,
boat.
it's not. But it was good. It was good. But a lot of what we do here and now, and yes, my facilities are centered toward, at first when I did it, because I was working with Memorial Hermann with family groups for 4 years as a facilitator for aftercare, where I would have them families for up to a year. And quite frankly, our system was falling short. We were doing everything we could with the family education and that piece, which you are correct. That is important. And if you study it every day and you live it every day and you work with families every day, you see how to cultivate that. And we have a separate facilitator here that is for families, family members. You can't have a recovery coach that's working with the client day in, day out. You can't get to the level, I feel. I'm probably a good counselor could, but I can't get to the place, relationship-wise, trust-wise, if they think that it's, or it even gives the appearance that everything is being run and squealed to the family member, or the family member thinks that they can vent their frustrations with me. Probably a third of my time is spent with family members. Having said that, but I'm not counseling them. We have a program and some things that I've written that addresses and positions that. Bill, my compadre that I worked with for years at the park, and has been doing this for 20 years, I think, with families. When we have our Sunday get together, we have an hour where this is before COVID, but the family members could come and visit, then have a meal, and then we break off into separate groups. And they have a weekly meeting, or now it's online. And there's people that's been in that group with Bill, I think now for probably 4 or 5 years. And whether the client stays here or not with our program, they're welcome, the family members, even if the person leaves, to go ahead and, because that's their group and they own it. And
That's all good stuff. Hunter, you were talking about, and this is kind of queued me up. Hunter just recently got a big grant, and in the process of the grant, they also, I don't think you were on. Hunter, you want to explain that situation again and the man you're working with?
Sure. We just secured a partnership with juvenile arbitration, and previously or prior to that, all new people we got were coming to us on their own accord because they wanted help, and now we're getting legally sanctioned. You have to come to the APG for 3 months, and we got 4 referrals yesterday, and I've been on the phone with parents nonstop saying, my child doesn't need to be here. It was just, this is the first time they've ever touched alcohol, and just a lot of resistance to the idea of recovery. And just, I think I remember talking to Kaylin back when she was with APG Las Vegas, and she said that they had just partnered with DJJ, and she was worried about how that was going to turn out. And I'm realizing that we're starting to immediately experience that. Just how do you deal with that and have that not become poison to the group?
And the reason why I'm bringing this up, is when we have run into that in the past, that situation was part of the impetus that created sober living for adolescents, because a great many, and one of the reasons why adult APGs developed is when we were hitting that in adolescent and young adult, the thing that was rising to the top were family members who had the disease themselves. Okay. And so you're talking about it really, really hard for an adolescent to be hanging out around mom and dad. In those days, it was just drinking. Now it's drinking, smoking dope, and taking pills. Hanging out around mom and dad who are getting high all the time. And when they're talking to the counselor, talking to you, they're like, he really doesn't have a problem, because they're looking through their own disease eyes, at it and trying to cover their own butts and everything else. Pardon the French. But that's kind of what's going on. And it gave rise to these girls' houses and, the adolescent sober living back in the 70s. Girls' houses and guys' houses, and then the young adult houses also, the young adult guys' house in the 70s too. Mike, back to you. Tell again kind of, and this thing that you're doing as you're listening to these problematic situations, right? And Hunter, I want to come back to you in a minute on what is the procedure to deal with this and what developed and what we learned over the years. But before we get too far on it, Mike, as you're listening, Tim's got something going out there that has virtually all of the elements of an alternative peer group program plugged into it, time-wise. And notice that how important time is, that length of time, case management, continuity of care, family involvement, it's fun, enthusiastic activities, all of that kind of stuff. It's all happening. You talked about it. So what you're doing, Mike, does any of this plug into some of that?
Yeah, actually, so I have 1,000,001 questions, right? And one of those questions includes, Tim, would it be feasible or appropriate one day for me to come out, be a fly on the wall, hang out, see how things are working, to the extent that you protect your client's confidentiality and stuff, but I would still be interested in just learning more about your program and seeing what you're doing. I have a few different questions, right? So thinking about, let me just fire off a few and then I'm going to be quiet and I'll let you talk. So one question is, I'm curious, are you running an Oxford home or a higher level home? And if so, what level are you running? My sense is you're doing a higher level, but I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that. What is your staffing? How are you resolving the difference between the typical expectation of a recovery resident that folks abstain from substances versus an APG model where perhaps folks are in a recovery journey, and while abstinence is encouraged for many, that's not always the path. So how are you resolving that, or are you doing an expectation for abstinence? What elements, where's your curricula coming from in terms of the programming you're doing? And I heard you mention the park, so I'm guessing your curriculum's coming a lot from there, but I'm just curious. And then the last question, I guess, is how are you measuring your outcomes? So I have like so many questions, and what do you do in that situation in which you have the parent who is also using? Because I think John and you guys are bringing up something that's really important, right? Because one of the things that I see with the APG that from my perspective that makes it unique from the other recovery services is the integration and focus on family. But what do you do then when the other family members are using, and yet your responsibility is primarily to your home culture versus that particular person, right? Because it's going to be different than how the APG does it. So I'm kind of rambling. I'm going to be quiet, but I'm just rattling off a few initial questions.
just a few minor questions. By the way, when he comes out to observe and be a fly on the wall, I want to let you know Mike has this little fly costume he wears, and it's really no big deal. It's totally unobtrusive. Go ahead.
Perfect. The thing that I got from all of that is they were all spot on questions, all spot on things that I live and deal with each day. And when I say deal with it, no, it is a pleasure to search and find and have a place. And I do have a position on everything that you just discussed. One that is based on evidence-based, on experience. And and to answer all of those questions, I think that you're going to need to come out and us spend a few hours one day. But I have, yes, in writing, tangibles that help, that fit into the program. We have, it's called the Signature Recovery Plan. And a lot of the methodology that I use for that comes from the business experience that I had. And no coincidence, John. The other folks may not know what a signature store is, but it's more than the signature process. I'll give you an example. It cost about $17.5 million to build a Kroger store. And the typical payoff for one of those would be in about 7 years. With a signature process, now it's all brick and mortar is the same, but with the signature process, we could pay one of those off in 6 months. And it was psychology. It had nothing to do with the can of beans or the meat shop or the service level or anything like that. It was the process, the signature process that we employed. Now, how does that translate to sober living and any other thing? Well, in order to get 300,000 people, which is the number of employees that we had, to follow you and become a leader, you had the signature process employed in the business as well. And so a lot of what we're talking about now, which is the most important thing that I'm doing, which is recovery with these folks. I think everyone, I've been very blessed in that I got sober in my own way from a stage 4 drug addict and alcoholic at age 19. Was able to put it behind me. I didn't do it with a recovery process or AA. I closed it off and turned into a workaholic, but that really worked well for me. And then and there's a difference. And this is one of the educational pieces that I have, and what my program is based on is there's a difference between being sober and serenity, that thing that's called the serenity prayer, finding the peace and confidence in what you do, in your own decisions, even though you know, you may have been told that you're mentally challenged or broken or disabled, or all the self-hate, guilt, and all those things that the resentments and things like that that you deal with. I found this path to serenity about 15 years ago. So that's the important number. Okay. Then you don't have the serenity and the confidence that you're not a broken or an evil person. Is the foundation for all the processes that I put in place. I got invited to give you an example. How can you be sober and still be affected by self-doubt, guilt, shame, all that ugliness? In my career, it was a high exposure job, and I got invited to the White House. And before you get to the White House, you know, ooh, that's a good thing. You've finally made it to that level. But then to a drug addict, alcoholic that hasn't been schooled in recovery, ooh, what are they going to find when the Secret Service does that background check? You're busted. And that's the underlying thing of addiction from my perspective that we deal with from the get-go, because everyone should have that chance, that fighting chance to come against this disease and to have a fruitful life and to be enjoy the gifts and the talents that you have. And that's the real power. And it's honesty with yourself. And what does that look like? Family meetings and expectations. What does that look like? Not hiding anything, but not giving up everything too.
Let me, if I could, the in your process, trying to hook what you're doing with your sober living and what Hunter is looking for. You know, the abstinent, when you said the abstinent, and Mike's question about abstinent, I would love to hear, because it's going to relate to what Hunter's working with right now. He's got family members who are not abstinent. He's got really what's going on is, I want to get high, leave me alone. I want to play the game. You know, that's really what's going on. And historically, the stance was, if you want to get high, that's your business. You want to get straight, that's ours. That's how APGs began in the 70s. It was that was it. Parent meetings were there just to keep parents busy and get them out of the counselors' faces, because the counselors thought that they were so cool, they could keep everybody coming and everything. And they would keep them. They were cool, and they would keep them coming for about 6 months, and they'd blow out. There was nothing they could do. Some old girlfriend would come along, or old boyfriend, or, you know, some tragedy, something, they'd go on out. That evolved to something called showing parents how to raise the bottom. You know, there wasn't, the intervention was not a word yet. So nobody talked about intervening or intervention or anything. They did talk to families about raising the bottom. If you're giving them money, you know, they have a place to stay, all of those kind of things, you're actually enabling. And this is before enabling was. But everybody was walking around going, let them hit a bottom, let them hit a bottom, let them hit a bottom. But these were 16-year-olds that were living at home. And so that threw it in. And in the end, so parent meetings not only were a place to learn to grow, but at times when one of these relapse points would come along, Hunter, and actually what's going on with you right now is it's right there in front of you. They're walking in the door, not wanting to be there. All right. And one of the elements that helped to develop some of the interventive processes with families actually began when DAP in Houston had contracts with, guess who? Juvenile and adult probation. That's exactly what happened. And that's when they started going, oh, wait a minute, maybe we can talk to the parents, you know, about how to do this. Okay. So we've got abstinence, you know, and how that's working in the, and how you work with that in the sober living. I'd love to hear that, and then we'll reflect back, Hunter, and give you some ideas on what to do with some of the situations that are coming at you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So Tim, if you go first and answer Mike's questions about how kind of where y'all are coming from in the abstinence thing. What if somebody gets high? Kind of boils down.
Well, and that's what it's going to go back to the philosophy, if you will, what the answer is going to have to be. When someone comes here, they're agreeing to be abstinent. Okay, that's part of the curriculum to be here. It's only fair from my point of view with everyone else that's trying to achieve that continued outrageous behavior or use is not tolerated. But it's individualized. It's completely different what the approach is for opiates. It's completely different for someone that's on speed, uppers, crank. It's completely different situation for alcohol. And then when you really couple it, it's not that simple of an answer even still, because you have to couple that with all the 8 different domains of their recovery. Yes, abstinence needs to be the goal, but it's not the hard rule that's going to break your neck. It's the one it's an education piece. And where we start, you back up. When someone comes, they're coming from treatment and they're sober. And more than likely, and I deal with a lot of people that just aren't your typical users. You know, I have professionals, executives, people that have been accomplished, but now it's finally caught up to them. It's got to the later stages and it's caught up to them. And the conversation begins with the orientation, what the expectations are. And to give you an example for medications, most of them are all of a sudden prescribed a whole bag full of the typical things that when they come from treatment that they weren't taking before they went in. And I'm not a medical doctor, don't pretend to be one, but I do know this, that some of those things, they're over medicated, or even if they're not over medicated, in that first few weeks, that first 30 days, their net need is going to change. They may have needed, give it trazodone to sleep. Okay, they may have needed, and they have them on a dosage. And it's just a simple conversation. Every day when we do the medications, it's a process, and it's a part of the signature process. Okay, how did you sleep last night? When you woke up this morning and we have on your schedule that you need to go, were you groggy? How are your, and we start with the discharge summary from wherever they came in. So it's very individualized. So there's no set answer, but I could show you the process that we use, and it's a daily check-in. And they self-adjust, not self-medicate, but they self-evaluate each day. And that act of caring, giving, attention, individualized, because each day when they get their new pill pack, I don't keep it locked up. They have their own pills. They have their own things. Well, we keep them locked up because there are people that have problems with pills. And so you respect that in a group environment. You know, it may not, they may be, you may be alcohol and you have just a few things, but you don't leave bags of medicine. That's a trigger for some people. So you respect that in the community, but you use your pill pack and you take it. If you feel like taking it, take it. If you don't, then at the end of the week, when you look at the things that you skipped, the things that you need, the things that you feel like you need to have, what's the appropriate response for getting more medication? You're teaching every step and everything about that.
All right.
And that becomes, go ahead.
Tim, what happens if, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mike. I was probably going to ask the same thing.
Well, I was just going to give a scenario, right? So what happens then if you identify a resident who has, you know, a substance in their UA, or if you identify a resident who is diverting some of their pills, right? Or that's just 2 examples, right? So what happens in that situation? Because what usually happens when I talk to recovery providers is to protect the culture of the home, what they usually do is work to remove that person from the home quickly and transfer them to a different housing situation. Whether that be going back to inpatient or whatever that person wants, but they're usually out of the home. Is that your approach, or do you do something different? And if you keep them in the home, how do you protect the culture of your home?
Hunter,
Okay,
before you answer that, Hunter, think about these issues as relates to, you know, people coming in the door for the APG itself also. Very similar stuff. Go ahead, Tim.
again, it's very individualized and it depends, because especially when you're talking about mat treatment, now there's only certain things that you can test, or if you are granted and have unlimited funds or something like that, you can verify what the usage level is. No, someone that's clearly obstructed, not themselves, and it's due to medications, and it's not always. It could be the physical. You have to be 100%. If they and they do not stay here if they're intoxicated. They cannot. Now, they can stay with a family member. They can stay with a sober friend. Example, if they fall off the wagon and say it's alcohol, and it's different for each of the different scenarios. But if it's alcohol and it's a minor slip up or a slam, that it's obvious. They need to go. If it gets to that point where it wasn't just a slip, they probably are going to need to go back to treatment or one of those things. If it's, and see, I don't do, and it depends, and it's a whole technique of how I use the combination of what the tests that I have. A breathalyzer, for example, my use for a breathalyzer is to determine, okay, if someone, it's still from a position of carry. If they come in and they're slammed drunk, yes, they get the breathalyzer, but why? To determine if I need to take them to the emergency room or if I need to take them to, to get them safe. Number one, we're not going to discuss punishment. We're not going to discuss anything else other than to get you safe. That's the number one priority. I use ETGs. ETG is a test that goes back 80 hours because this is about responsibility and regaining trust in yourself and building yourself. An ETG goes back 80 hours. And if it's a cough syrup or any alcohol in your system, okay? And so we do the random ETG. Why? Because you have to make that choice. And if it's coming from an oppressive point of view, in my point of, that they know that you're here and you're out by 5 o'clock, but you're not going to be here till 2 o'clock tomorrow, that means that I have this. No, you take that argument completely out of the equation. Because by using the ETG, and by using the ETG 2 times a week or 3 times a week or randomly, you catch any alcohol use. Now, the same thing if you go off into the different, if it's a mat treatment, are they doing it as prescribed? I caught a local facility where someone would hook up someone at a mat facility where someone that was being treated for opiates. And I, having been a drug addict and alcoholic myself, you know what that looks like. You know what that expression looks like. You know what those nods mean. And so you can sort that out pretty quick. And you just address it and be honest about it. And
we have lots and lots, as you can tell, there's going to be a huge amount of conversation that can be held around this. Hunter, yeah. I want to go back to your situation though, because what is coming out of this is, if you'll notice, what Tim's talking about is from the beginning, he has a thing that has been outlined with expectations and responses and those kind of things. That same process needs to be applied to basically all new people. Mm-hmm. I don't care where they're coming from. What we use, and I'm just, and you're welcome to do whatever, but what we use is something called a strategy appointment with the family. All right.
Oh, yeah. When you did that, we stole it immediately.
Yeah, we do it. It takes about, and I tell them up front, it takes about an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. And we go over we give them an example of recovery. So, I usually use my story because it gives me things to refer back to. Most people, there's a lot of feeling that if you'll let them do the talking first, it'll get them, they can hear, it's a good idea. But I'm gonna let you work all of that kind of stuff out. There are a lot of people around. But I will tell you that strategy appointment, that what we call a strategy appointment, what Tim probably calls an intake or orientation, or I think you mentioned orientation is the word, all of those kind of things, that's where you can start to lay it all down. If you will arm yourself with solid information about how this disease works and how recovery works on a neurological basis, as well as everybody in recovery is rich on experience and the psychological side. What is missing, in my opinion, a lot of times is fluency on the neurological side. It will answer a lot of questions about math, what part it plays in it. If they're using sleep meds, well, the facts are, as long as these meds are being used, the neurological recovery, neurological healing is postponed. And everybody needs to understand and not pretend that everything's going well. There are situations that it's called for and it's a good idea, but let's not pretend. They operate on the same part of the brain that alcohol, THC, and all the other prescriptions do. So as long as they keep pushing those neurotransmitters, neurological health has not started to occur. May not be hitting it as hard as they were with all that dope they were shooting, but they're still keeping it broken. And Matt is set up to move towards neurological health ultimately. So you've got to keep all of that in mind. And the family has to understand that. That parent who's saying he's only drunk a little bit needs to understand a 14-year-old, an average of less than 3 months to break that neurotransmitter regulation system. But I don't care if he has just been, using. Notice how that popped out. The reason why that popped out is because I have become very, very, very fluent in the neurological realities of this disease and recovery. You want to seek that affluency, and then you want to put it into those strategy appointments, because it's the actual broken neurology that sets the stage for everything we do. Why it takes so dang long to get well, what keeps people from getting well, how we're going to deal with MAT, what's the importance of then being able to move on and look at the dealing with the aberrant psychology, et cetera. If you'll start putting together the strategy appointments, orientation, or whatever you decide to call it, and these things will all start fleshing out, and it'll start setting up ground rules, et cetera, for these folks being referred to.
So we do 2 strategy appointments, 2 weeks. And so this is all happening before the first strategy appointment. I'm getting phone calls just because they looked at our website and are like, hold on.
Yeah, you have to, I hate to say it, but this is where you start adding personnel, and you have to train them on how to do a strategy appointment. There's not just one person, because as you grow, it gets more and more and more people calling, and getting them in there for that hour and a half. In dealing with the probation department, all right, you need to make it clear up front that they need to prepare the families that if they want to take part in this, they're going to have to start off with the strategy appointment,
May I interject one piece of my program?
Sure.
That it goes directly with what you're saying, the neurological part of it. Why do I call this my signature plan? Why? It's not a bunch of rules that I'm laying out, a bunch of papers that they can stuff into a binder. No, each page you go over, and guess what's required for you to go to the next page? A signature. A signature. It comes from a different place in your brain. You can sit there and nod like this and go to sleep through anything, everything. The signature process that I have, okay, you can sit here and talk about it, but to have the person sitting down when we're doing an interview and we have a set of, in the assessment, for them to write it, on that page for them to write it on that page. It comes from a different place in the brain, and it is a different place of accountability and responsibility that you're on the same page and they're committed to it. They're not looking at your page and then nodding and whatever next. And they don't remember what the house rules are. They don't remember the curfews at 9 o'clock. They don't, oh, wait. Let's go back to the page right here. Curfew's 9 o'clock. Here's where you miss it. So this takes a lot of that craft, if you will. Now, it don't mean you're dogmatic about the enforcement. No, but it puts it in a different place. And so the signature piece, you'll see it throughout my program where they're signing off and where they're each week when they're doing their check-in. What are they doing? They are writing down. I'm not sitting here writing down the results, of what they said they did. No, they write down what they're high. They write down what they're low. They write down what they want to have help with this week, because it's coming from them to go from here to have put their name on it and wrote it down, and they're asking for that help. That's a different meaning.
Right. Guys, we're almost out of time. This hour always passes so darn fast. It's just irritating. Couple things real quick that you guys I think will find interesting is, especially you, Hunter. What are your average ages, Tim, in
my facilities?
Yeah.
Average age in my facilities is mid 40s right now.
Okay, all right. Well, this won't have anything to do with you yet, but this does have something to do with Hunter and Rihanna. You're going to know about it too. The New Hampshire folks had a contact with a performer, and his name is can't remember his name, but he's with the Dropkick Murphys. Y'all familiar with them? You ought to listen to their music. You would like it, by the way. Y'all listen. You get to come as the leader, as a part of the APG, but your people are too old. They don't get to come to this. Anyway, he is later this month. I think it's the 29th. You'll see a promotion, and your young people will get to take part in a Zoom call with him, and he's going to perform a little bit and talk to them and all sorts of stuff. Sean and those folks out in New Hampshire set it up. I mean, you can come. You'll like the music too, by the way. You'll be seeing it. That's one thing. Number two, Angie has finished the manual for a healthy group. That y'all gave input and everything. It's a 43-page manual. It's being edited right now a little bit. It's going to be coming out real soon. And you heard the next 2 weeks what's going to go on. That the association is set up as a hub for all of us to do what we need to do and share and talk about things that make us helpful, etc. And I got to go.
John, real quick.
Yes.
Do you have suggested readings for the neurology on the brain with addiction?
Yeah. Do you, Crystal Collier's new book?
No, Crystal Collier's.
Dr. Crystal Collier, who has history in treating, in APGs. She was one of the original board members. Here it is right here. It's Neuro Whereabouts Guide, and it's actually set up for parents too, family members.
Wow.
So it covers a whole bunch of stuff. Look how thick it is. It just got published. This is one of the very first copies. I don't know if it's been shifted over to soft copy or not yet, but I mean, it has loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of information.
Okay, I'll order that.
And the more you talk about it, the more adept you become. And you'll be shocked as you get really, really in touch with the neurological side of this disease, what it'll do with your understanding of your own recovery path.
Wow.
It's also, if any of you guys are interested in the NADAC has a subcommittee at the national level that is putting together a white paper on limiting marketing of these neurotoxins.
Wow.
Most of us are made customers and talked into it before we're 8 or 9 years old by the marketing world. That the cool way to be is with using, et cetera. And there is a committee that's writing a white paper, and that is going to shift to a group that's going to drive for limiting marketing of these substances, just like we do with tobacco. So if you have any interest in that, let me know and keep in touch. I love you guys. I'll see you next week. Thank you for so much. Mike, you got lots and lots to do. Go to work.
All right. Thank y'all for this talk. Y'all have a great day.
Love you guys.
Bye, y'all. Bye now.